gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. What we have happening right now across the country and really around the whole world is that I think that people are realizing that the crap that they've been feeding us, especially here in America, is actually making us really sick. We're dying earlier. We've got obesity rates through the roof. We've got kids that can't sit still in school. We've got autism skyrocketing. And thankfully, I think, RFK, I wish JFK was still here giving us these lessons, but RFK Jr. has made this central to what he's focusing on is just how sick America is. And there's a lot of different solutions to it. But one thing that I've been really thinking about a lot lately and watching and seeing this big trend of is the carnivore diet. I think I first heard about it from Jordan Peterson, where he used it to heal a lot of issues. And I think his daughter was also healing a lot of issues with it. And I thought, that's interesting. I've always loved steak. I mean, what would happen if I was just eating steak and, steak and eggs and bacon? I mean, it seems like every man's dream. I mean, I even wore my flannel shirt today for this interview because I wanted to embrace the manliness of just eating meat and eggs every day. So my guest today is Dr. Shawn Baker, who is a doctor that was realizing, through treating patients that actually, if he helped them fix their diets, he could help them avoid surgery and everything. And the place where he was working wasn't very happy because he was getting rid of customers, right? And saying, hey, they don't need our surgery anymore because I've healed them through diet. And so he's gone down this journey through his own, personal process. And he's been doing carnivore for, I think, close to a decade now, if not longer. He's written a book on it. He was on Joe Rogan. He blew up about it. And so today's discussion is just, what is the carnivore diet? Why is it so popular these days? Why is it being attacked, right, by a lot of the mainstream, folks and the medical journals and stuff is, hey, it's not good. There's a lot of resistance to it, which I tend to trust the things that are attacked by the mainstream. That's one of my little ways of seeing, okay, where's the truth at? And so we're going to be diving into what is the carnivore diet? What do you eat? What don't you eat? What are the risks? How does it affect testosterone? How does it affect muscle growth? Why don't you eat that broccoli that comes with your beef? Or maybe you can. So we're going to be diving into a lot of this and more, but I'm actually very interested to learn this because I'm actually considering probably within the next couple of days doing a trial, say 1, 2, 3 month trial of carnivore and just seeing how it reacts with me, because I would love to be walking into a room and just embodying like a Viking that just got done eating half a cow, right? In the right way, of course. So anyway, folks, I hope you're going to enjoy this interview. It's going to be a lot of fun. Shawn Baker's, he's just a great guy and he's an example. I mean, he's in his late 50s and the guy looks like he's like a college linebacker. So he certainly is walking the walk that he's talking about. So folks, please enjoy the interview with Dr. Shawn Baker. Dr. Shawn Baker, man, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, likewise, my pleasure. So I'm interested to chat to you and I guess by extension, your audience. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So it's been incredible because I feel like that the entire nation and really the world is learning a lot more about why America is so sick and why we're so obese. And, I was born in the 80s. I was a pretty heavy kid. By the time I was 15, I weighed 250. I'm 6'1", but a lot of it was just fat, right? Because I grew up on the standard American diet. We had Cheerios and Fruit Loops and stuff like that. But looking at the food pyramid, it was also we could say we were following it. It was grains and then fruits and vegetables and limited oils. And I still remember seeing the Crisco cans sitting in the in the pantry growing up. And so I feel like that I'm the perfect example of someone who was damaged by that. And I've struggled as an adult to maintain my weight because as my metabolism is all screwed up from the seed oils and the Crisco, Procter & Gamble Crisco. Thanks, for those guys for that. And I've been interested in looking into, carnivore diets. And I did, back at that time, I was in high school, I did Atkins diet, some variation of it, lost a lot of weight and got into much better shape. But you're someone I consistently see all over the place, and your videos are great because it's you just use a video, it's a TikTok kind of video, and you're sitting there with a big, 2-pound steak and a giant sword for a knife, and you're just eating it and commenting. And so, give us a little bit of your background and a little bit of your expertise, because for me, when I think of carnivore, I think of Shawn Baker. But I want to see a little more about yourself, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, I am a physician. I was, traditionally trained as an orthopedic surgeon. I spent, several decades practicing as a surgeon, and I eventually sort of came to the conclusion that, my ability to heal people was being limited by what I was doing. I came to a real realization when I remember I just happened to start putting people on diets to help them lose weight for surgery. And I started noticing that their joint pain was going away to the point where we didn't need to do the surgery anymore. And I thought that was really cool and exciting, but the hospital administration did not. And they actively discouraged me from, doing that in more ways than one. And so I kind of thought that was really odd that we would, so I mean, it very became quickly clear to me that it was more about profits than people for some reason. And so that's kind of what, and this is something like this occurred something like 10, 12 years ago. I made that discovery. And then I kind of started really going down the rabbit hole of nutrition and how it impacts, health and specifically disease. And so I kind of migrated through all different various dietary strategies and ended up on this crazy all meat thing, which at the time was being called a zero carb diet. And I thought it was absolutely nuts when I first heard about it. I mean, like everybody kind of does. It just doesn't sound, because, our perception, our sort of, experience is the grocery store with its 10,000 different products. And we expect all this variety in a diet. And the reality is, I mean, if you go through most of human existence, I mean, no one had the level of variety we have now. I mean, it was like, if you even lived before, even just before, a few hundred years ago, before refrigeration became widely available, before massive transportation was widely available, most people were kind of stuck eating what grew around them or what they could kill, out in the backyard. And so like the concept of a meat-based diet, depending on where you are in the world. I mean, if you're in, the sort of the circumpolar regions, rural Mongolia, the Nilotic African regions, some of the southern Brazil, that was sort of normal. It wasn't considered weird at all, but it is now. And so, but I mean, I like I said, I ended up this rabbit hole. I back in 2016, I was just kind of starting out on social media. I had a small Twitter following at the time, a couple thousand people. And I said, look, I'm going to try this crazy all meat diet. I know I'm going to die. I'm going to do it for a month. I'm sure I'm going to die. What am I going to die of? I'm going to die of either scurvy, or my heart's going to clog up, or my colon's going to explode from lack of fiber or something like that. Right. So, and I did it for 30 days. And of course I didn't die. And none of those bad things happened to me. And in fact, I felt fantastic. And the best I'd felt, and at that time was just before I turned 50. And I remember I was like, man, this is the best I've felt in, gosh, 10, 15 years. I had, these weird aches and pains that I just attributed to normal aging, which, you kind of expect that as you get older. It's just like, start slowing down. You got a bit sore back, sore knees. And I was experiencing all that stuff, despite the fact that I was, regularly exercising and I was an athlete. But that just went away, and I was blown away by that. And so I did it for 30 days. So this is a cool experiment. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back to my more normal, my normal omnivorous diet, my mixed, the diet that everybody would be happy with. And I immediately felt worse. And I was like, you know what? All things being considered, I'd like to feel better. And so I just kind of persisted on this kind of all meat type of diet. And then, shortly after that, I was able to convince 100 people to do it. We did we collected data on this. We'd set up a website, and we called this thing called an N equals many experiment, because everybody's saying, what's an N equals one? It's just your own personal anecdote. So we had 100 people do it, and they did it for 90 days. And the average person lost about 30 pounds, and their resting heart rate went down by 10 beats, and they lost about 8 centimeters on their waist. And, we tracked everything we could track for free because we didn't have any money. And it was just like, all the subjective markers got better. Yeah. They slept better. They felt, but their digestion got better. Their joints hurt less. Their skin was better. Their sexual function was better. Their mental health was better. So this, I was kind of talking about this, and then this guy named Joe Rogan sort of heard about it and then asked me to come on the show to chat about it. And then, of course, obviously, raises the awareness in public. And then I got all of a sudden, then I became public enemy number one from all the vegans on the planet, because I'm out here as this guy telling people, hey, eating meat makes people healthy. It seems to anyway. So that was, back in 2016, 2017. And I've been, kind of persisting with this for the last now 8 years. And,
Folks, I want to talk about something really important: your hearing health. Look, as you get older, it's easy to overlook, but getting your hearing checked is crucial. Did you know that untreated hearing loss can lead to social isolation, depression, and even cognitive decline? So that's why it's so important to take action early. And that's where here.com comes in. If you occasionally notice you're asking people to repeat themselves or don't hear your phone ring, you may want to get a free hearing consultation from here.com. So here.com has over 400,000 happy customers and offers an industry leading hearing aid developed by German engineers. So it's nearly invisible and it can transform your life. It even connects to your phone. So, folks, take advantage of the 45-day no-risk trial by visiting here.com/Seth. Again, that's here.com/Seth, S-E-T-H.
Here I am, still alive, still haven't died, still haven't had a heart attack, still don't have scurvy. In fact, I'm thriving as an athlete, and now we've had literally, there are now hundreds of thousands of people that have done this diet, including some, pretty prominent people. I just had the world's strongest man, Eddie Hall, consult me to set up the diet for him. It's just so it's obviously taking place, and we're starting to get research. We just I think 2 days ago or Monday. So on Labor Day, we just published a study on inflammatory bowel disease and carnivore diet showing complete resolution, at least in, some of the population. We don't know if it's going to affect 10% of the population, 90% of the population. We need to do more studies on this, but certainly I don't think anybody at this point can deny that it does seem to be beneficial for a number of people. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
And so let's start with just the basics, because I'm learning this, through you, and I think a lot of the audience is also learning this, and maybe they're seasoned, kind of with this particular way of eating. But what does the diet look like? What are the things that you eat? What are those that you don't eat? Because I've been looking into what they call carnivore diets, as I understand, or also animal-based diet. Whereas animal-based diet also includes raw honey and some fruits and such, versus carnivore, which is a little more strict. So starting with carnivore, what are the fundamentals of what you do and don't eat on a carnivore diet?
Yeah, in general, if it had a parent or a face, you can eat it. And if it's a plant, you don't. That's the basics of it. You just eat meat. Meat, eggs, dairy products, things like that. For the most part, you try to eat, whole unprocessed foods for the most part. The vast majority of the people that will do a carnivore diet over the long term will kind of be, 90, 95% strict. Not everybody's, even myself, I will eat, I'll use my diet example, what I've been eating for the last 8 years. 90% of my diet is beef. 90, maybe 95%. Every day I eat steak or ground beef or something like that. And I'll add eggs to that occasionally. Sometimes I'll have some seafood, shrimp or scallops or, piece of fish or something like that. Once in a while, I'll have, I eat quite a few eggs too. I think I mentioned that. Every once in a while, I'll have something that's off the plan. Just on a whim. I'll have a piece of cake or something like that. But it's not like part of my diet. It's like rare. It's like once or twice a year or something like that. I think that, it's simple. It's you got to eat enough fat. That's important, because if you're not eating carbohydrates, you need to consume energy. And, when we look at what are the requirements for human nutrition, right? Essential things are amino acids, there are essential fats, you need energy, and you need some vitamins and minerals. That's what we need essentially to thrive and live as a human being. Now, you can get that in the absence of carbohydrates, you can get that in the absence of plants. I know people would argue, what about vitamin C and various things like that? And we can delve into that if we want to, but suffice it to say, you can literally live indefinitely on just red meat. And I've done it. I've lived 2 years straight with nothing but red meat and was totally fine. Like I said, just because of my own personal preference and convenience, like when I'm traveling, sometimes it's hard to get a steak at 7:00 in the morning. It's not always available. So I'll eat eggs. I'll have eggs and bacon or something like that, which is, more traditionally associated with breakfast. But that's kind of what it looks like, and it's something that it's not for everybody, certainly. Not everybody needs to do that. I've never been one to say that. I don't think humans are omnivorous animals. We are. We are opportunistic omnivores. I would argue we're probably facultative carnivores, which is a little bit different way to say that we thrive on meat. It's one of those things. If for some reason you could only eat one food the rest of your life, you could eat ribeye steaks and you would live very well. I think you would do quite well with that, because it has enough fat in there. There's obviously the protein and the requirements that you need. But I think that the average person, like who do I recommend it for? Anybody that's not doing well metabolically, autoimmune wise, it's got some sort of issue. Maybe they're not happy with their mental health. I mean, when you start looking at the number of people in the United States, for instance, that have either diabetes, pre-diabetes, autoimmune diseases, mental health issues, we're starting to talk like damn near half the country has something falls into that category. So a lot of people could benefit from this significantly. And, in fact, I have a company, Rivera, which is a digital health company. We have physicians licensed in all 50 states, and we take people in and we support them. We change their nutrition. Some people we put on a carnivore diet. Some people we put on some version of elimination of whatever garbage might be making them sick. Usually it's a lower carb approach, and we've had tremendous success with that. But that's just something, as I know we kind of alluded to RFK and the people talking about finally fixing the health in our country now. Yeah, thank you for that. And as much as I like to see the politicians talking about this and bringing this to the forefront and kudos to Bobby Kennedy for doing that. And I had a discussion with his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, a few weeks ago, talking about this stuff as well. And I don't know how optimistic I am that they're going to actually be able to affect change, assuming they get into office, because that's still not a given. Because of the resistance that you'll see. I mean, I think, I don't know that we can rely on the government to make sweeping changes that'll be meaningful. I think they might do some lip service and might make some small changes, but I think our food system is so incredibly broken that I think you just got to do it yourself. I mean, you got to just sort of say, hey, look, I'm going to have to take it upon myself. And that's my assumption. And if I'm pleasantly surprised and all of a sudden they get rid of all the crap out of the diet, I'd be happy with that, but I'm not going to count on that.
And so if someone eats carnivore, right, and say you're waking up and you're doing eggs and bacon, and but so dairy is okay, right? So is it better to have raw? Like, I consume a fair bit of raw milk as part of my diet. I love cheese. I'm just a big cheese guy. But so does dairy in the form of cheese or milk fit in to the carnivore?
Can. I mean, it can. It depends on the individual. Some people, I mean, to be honest, some people dairy is problematic for them, and it depends on the issue. I mean, like as a cheese, I mean, dairy products are designed to put on weight. I mean, that's why dairy exists. It's designed to grow things, and it's a great source of. It's a wonderful source of protein. I mean, it's a wonderful source of fat. One of the problems, a lot of people tend to overeat that, particularly like I just tell people, if your goal is to lose weight, drinking calories doesn't make sense because it's so easy to overconsume calories in liquid form. Dairy, again, dairy is designed so that we consume a lot of it because it's designed to put on, to put on weight. It's designed for a small animal to get to a big animal. That's what the purpose of dairy is. But having said that, I consume dairy from time to time. I just got back from I was in France, Spain, and Portugal for the last 2 weeks, and they had some wonderful dairy. I mean, the cheese is awesome in France. I mean, some of the yogurts and stuff like that were tremendously good. That's not something I normally consume a lot in my diet day to day, but I do go through phases. Like I said, I do what's available. And, for all the people that are talking about how great the meat is in Europe, I think the U.S. beef is wonderful. And we got the best beef in the world as far as I'm concerned. And I was so excited to get back home and tear into a big old USDA prime ribeye steak, man. It was like, it was really good.
And so when someone's eating like that, what changes in the body, right? I'm very familiar with ketosis. I used to, when I was doing keto diets, I'd even have little, strips I'm peeing on, and I'd consume ketones to help my body kick into that. But, if someone, say, does a month of only, let's say someone only ate steak for a month, like steak with, say, butter and herbs on it. Okay.
Right. Okay.
What happens physiologically over the course of that month?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Well, first of all, you're going to lose some weight. I mean, you're going to lose some water. I mean, because you are, assuming your diet was a mixed diet and you're consuming carbohydrates before, what'll happen is your insulin levels will likely come down a little bit. And as a consequence of that, insulin has an impact on the kidney, and it tells the kidney to hang on to more salt and water. That's what insulin does in the kidney, or one of the rules. So when you don't have that input anymore, you basically just pee off all your sodium, basically. Not all of it, but some of it. And so you'll lose some water weight. And so as a consequence, some people need to make sure they stay hydrated, because it can be, if it's too much, you end up with headaches. This is a so-called keto flu, where you become relatively dehydrated, and you get headaches and hypotension, and you maybe don't have energy. So you got to stay on top of your hydration. Your bowel movements are going to, your frequency of your bowel movements are going to change, because now you go from a situation where you have all this indigestible fiber, which our body literally can almost do nothing with. I mean, literally all the fiber, like when you spend all this money on organic fruits and vegetables, and we've all done that, and half the time we end up throwing it out because it gets rotten in our fridge. But even when we eat it, most of it's not absorbed by our body. Most of it just ends up in the toilet. So it's really an inefficient way. Now with food prices being so expensive, you're thinking about those fruits and vegetables are just ending up in the toilet anyway. much of the nutrition is, and so it's more efficient to eat meat because our body will literally absorb almost all with very little waste. I mean, so you end up going to the bathroom less frequently. So if you normally have 2 bowel movements a day, which is pretty typical for most people, you might go to having a bowel movement every 2 to 3 days instead, because you're just not wasting food anymore. It's all being absorbed and being utilized like it should be. So it's a much more efficient way of eating. You may find that your satiety is much better. We know there's these new drugs out there, these GLP-1s, Ozempics and Wegovy's and whatnot. They act by stimulating this incretin hormone called GLP-1, which is secreted normally in the bottom, at the end of our small intestine, in a place called the ileum. And meat actually stimulates it quite well as well. It's known as a natural stimulant for this this hormone. Now the drug, it sticks around for the half-life is huge. It's like days and days, whereas normally it's only supposed to hang around for about 5 minutes when we produce it naturally. And so what happens is when our intestine starts sensing nutrients way down at the distal end, at the end of it, saying, wait, slow things down because we're getting too much nutrition here. We haven't absorbed it yet. So it's called the ileal brake. And so what happens with the drug is it just slams everything shut. And so you end up not processing food very well, and you feel full, and some people get nauseous and have side effects. And, some people obviously a lot of people lose weight with that. But so you end up with, likely most people just feel full longer, and they just don't want to eat. I mean, it's like instead of eating 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, like most people just graze all day. You get up, have breakfast, and then by 10 o'clock you're hungry and you have your muffin, and then by noon you want your lunch, and then you start crashing in the afternoon. You get a little sugar to bring you there, and you have dinner, and then you have a little nighttime snack. That goes away. Most people on this diet will eat about twice a day. That's pretty typical. They'll eat. They might eat a big breakfast. Let's say you have a 12-ounce steak and a couple of eggs for breakfast. You may not even want lunch. You're just like, man, I'm good. I don't need it. And then you make it to dinner and you have dinner, and then you're good to go. And so that's what a lot of people see. So less frequent meals, more satiety, decreased bowel frequency. Again, you have to deal with hydration. And then, that's pretty consistent across the board. Now, there's some people that have different things occurring to them depending on, what else is going on. Diabetics will see, or people with blood glucose issues will often see a very quick normalization of their blood glucose. It's been very effective for diabetes. I mean, we've got a nice study out of Harvard that was published in 2021, 262 diabetics. 100% of them were able to come off all injectable medications outside of insulin. 92% of them were able to come off all their insulin. It's really effective for those types of issues. And so, it's got a great clinical utility, at least, what we're seeing so far. I think that, some people, one of the things that, one of the big errors a lot of people make is they just don't eat enough because, like I said, it's so satiating. Like, I'm just full. And it's one of those things where you're like, when you're hungry, when you're eating carbohydrates, when you're hungry, you're hungry. It's like, man, it's like, a sledgehammer hitting your head. You got to eat, It's more subtle in this situation. It's like, you're kind of like, well, I don't know if I'm not that hungry. And so sometimes you have to sort of force yourself to eat on some occasions, just to make sure you're not, you're not, undernourishing yourself, because that can happen, because it's so satiating that people just often undereat, and then they start having issues with poor energy and mood and stuff like that. So you got to make sure you stay on top of your caloric consumption, because the other thing is, if our body is very efficient and very smart about its resources, and if you're chronically consuming lots of fiber and lots of carbohydrates, you have the metabolic machinery set up for that. You have cell types that are expressed. You have enzyme pathways which are expressed, and the genes are obviously always producing more proteins. Through our whole the way we produce proteins off our with our mRNA and our ribosomes. And so that changes a little bit. And, even the cells that populate our gut, our gut turns over every day or two. We have a completely new gut lining about every 2 to 3 days. And so you got to slowly change the prevalence of certain cell types that are more, if you're not using fiber and carbohydrates, and you have different cell types populate the gut to some degree. And so that has to take time. So it takes, it probably takes the average person anywhere between 3 and 8 weeks to transition on this diet. I tell most people, if you're going to do it and you want to see if it impacts whatever, your mental health or your arthritis or whatever you're doing it for, give it about 3 months. And and the reason I say that is because a few years ago, I had 12,000 people that I'd surveyed that were doing the diet. And I asked them all the questions. We sent out like 25 different questions. And we asked them, one of the questions was, how long did it take before you noticed that you saw significant improvement? And there was some people within days, and immediately they felt better. But I mean, for the average across the board, by 3 months, the vast majority of people had seen some level of significant improvement on some condition, depending on what they were doing it for. So, I mean, if you're going to do it and you really want to see if it's really effective for X, Y, or Z condition, give it a full 3 months. And that's how I would approach it.
And is it something you can you basically quit carbohydrates and sugars cold turkey? Like my diet, as an example, overall we eat very healthy, right? Almost everything's organic, mostly locally sourced from the farm market, or, we get our beef and whatnot from local butchers that we know. But I have sugar periodically, or honey, or maple syrup, or just this morning we made apple spelt muffins, right, with some butter on them, that kind of stuff. So if someone like me, now I'm not someone that, again, it's going out and pounding down a quarter pounder with cheese and French fries as my normal diet, right? So overall, right, I'm quite healthy. But if I just went cold turkey and say tomorrow, I say, okay, for the next 3 months, I'm only going to eat meat, eggs, and a little bit of dairy. Would that shock my system too much? Would there be a difficult period? Is it better to ease into it? How would you?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person. So, I mean, somebody who's generally healthy and already kind of lower carb, it's not that hard to transition kind of cold turkey. If someone is really carb dependent and maybe they're on medications, then yeah, I mean, it can be a problem. I mean, that's one of the reasons we set up our healthcare company, because we have people that transition and they do have problems. Diabetics become hypoglycemic, hypertensive people become hypotensive if they haven't tapered their medicines off. So there are some people for which a rapid transition is no problem. There's other people's where more caution is needed to be exercised. And so, but I think that one of the things that you have to realize is there is a period of time where it takes the body to sort of ramp up the machinery to sort of change the different fuel selection that you're going to have. Now, your glucose never goes to zero. I mean, it's like, I mean, my blood glucose is always there is always some. It's never zero, even though I don't eat carbohydrates, because our body can make it. But I mean, there is a period of time where, like I said, if you're, like for whatever, whether you want to do it or not is up to you and what your reasons are. But if you're like, hey, I want to really try to do it for 3 months, you're going to probably deal with cravings at some point. I mean, that just occurs, and maybe on day 2, it may be on day 12. It just depends. And it's like, why is that occurring? It's often tied to hormonal surges. And there's one hormone in particular called ghrelin, which often peaks around 8 p.m. for a lot of people. And a lot of people experience this where, it's later at night. Maybe you've had dinner at 6 and it's like 8, 9 o'clock, getting ready for bed, but you just want something like sweet to eat before you go to bed. And, you look around the cabinets and maybe you find the chocolate bar and you eat that or something. Or sometimes you don't find it and you're like, oh, hell, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm kind of hungry. And you wake up the next morning, you're not hungry. It's like, well, why was I hungry 8 hours ago, but now I'm not hungry? Well, it's because of hormonal fluctuations have occurred. So that ghrelin has now kind of come down and you're not hungry. And so I tell people that, look, if you know that these cravings are tied to hormonal surges, then they're time limited. So it's like, and usually it's about a 30 to 45 minute period of time. So you might have this craving. It's only going to last 30, 45 minutes. So if you can just deal with it, go for a walk, do something, distract yourself, or eat something that's more in line with what you have on the diet. There's ways you can deal with those things. Drink a bunch of fluid, stretch out your gut. To deal with those cravings. I tell people have a plan. Like when I'm talking to people, I say, "What's your plan for cravings?" What do you mean plan? I mean, oh yeah, plan. You don't plan. If you fail to plan, is planning to fail, basically. So have a plan in place. I'm going to go for a walk for 45 minutes or something. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, the things that make it difficult is if you go from a higher carb diet and you're like, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds and I'm going to do it in the next 2 months, and then you go into a carnivore diet and then you intentionally suppress how much you eat. you're going to struggle. So I tell people in the beginning, and again, really, again, the generalizable applicability for all people is debatable. But I mean, a lot of people, most people that I encounter that have struggled with weight or health conditions, often they have also, concomitantly, they have food addiction issues. I mean, if you look at the food system we have, and I've mentioned this before, I had a lady who worked for one of these food companies, and her job was as a chemist, a food chemist. She said her job was basically make the food as addictive as possible. And she was they're very good at it. And they know, I mean, they literally make this food that's addictive. And so it's estimated that we have something like 14% of the population is a food addict, which is kind of parallels what the alcoholism rates are in the US. And so when you're dealing with that, I tell people, hey man, your job number one is just to change your relationship with food. And and what I find is the most effective thing is just eat enough high nutrient value food. And I think meat is the most nutrient beneficial food you can consume. You keep cramming enough of that in your throat until you're like, I don't want anything else. Because people ask me, well, how much should I eat? Well, eat enough so you don't want any cupcakes or whatever. I mean, that's the answer, particularly in the beginning. It's like change your relationship so that it's not that you're never going to have another cupcake for the rest of your life, but you need to get to the point where you don't need to have it. I mean, I can be hungry and there can be a plate of, I used to love dessert. I mean, I still like desserts, but I don't eat them. But I mean, there could be the most delicious, delectable red velvet cake or something like that sitting in front of me. And I could be hungry and I'm like, you know what? I don't need that. I'm good. Whereas 10 years ago, I'd be like, give me 6 pieces. It's like I've changed that, which is, it's liberating. It's very freeing. Whereas a lot of people will say, oh, it's such a restrictive diet, but it's not. I mean, it's literally unburdening you, it's unshackling you from food addiction, which I think is the opposite of restrictive. And then, once you've kind of got to that point where you're like, hey, I can take it or leave it, then you're acting under your own intelligence. Whereas before it was almost a lot of people just mindlessly eat. It's like they just eat. They don't even know why they're eating. They're just like, the man on the TV told me to eat. They're almost like hypnotized or something. So yeah, the short answer is many people can do it cold turkey. Some people probably best to transition. I'd say spend, 4 or 6 weeks slowly lowering the carbohydrates, lowering down the fiber, and then, certainly working with a physician if you're going to do that, if you're on some of these different medications, because, you're not going to need them anymore. And that's a problem. If you're taking medication you don't need, you have these side effects like high blood pressure is a perfect example. If you're taking all these high blood pressure meds and all of a sudden you don't, the inflammation goes down in your body, you don't need them anymore. Now all of a sudden you're hypotensive. You get up, you get dizzy, you fall down, you whack your head on the ground. And then that's not a good thing. So we got to be cautious about that.
What about bone broths? Because we do a lot of bone broths, and I recently got we've got a big Napoleon grill, and I got the rotisserie for it. And so I can shove like 2 or 3 chickens on there and just do a slow rotisserie chicken, which is amazing. It turns into like 5 meals. But we also take all the bones and we do a 24-hour bone broth for chicken, or if we're doing beef, it might be a 2 or 3 day bone broth, which, I think is obviously it's you're getting all the nutrients from the marrow and all that kind of stuff. But is bone broth, I would assume it would be absolutely part of the diet, but what are your thoughts on bone broths?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I mean, for sure. I mean, I mean, there's some great benefits for bone broth. I mean, there's calcium in there. There's, some of the collagenous properties. It's obviously a lot of times the electrolytes. A lot of people sip on bone broth as a ways to rehydrate themselves. As I mentioned, hydration can be an issue. So, yeah, so bone broth can be fine. Now, some of the commercially prepared bone broths for some people are problematic depending on what they add to it, because a lot of times they add, just like anything that's shelf stable. Anything that can sit on the shelf for a year, you probably don't have any business eating that stuff, in my view. So, I mean, you got to be cautious about that. But yeah, you take a chicken carcass, a leftover, you pick all the meat off the chicken and you want to make bone broth. That's great. That's a great use of that resource for sure.
And how about muscle? Because this is something that I've heard a lot of varying opinions on, and different people, trainers I've worked with, they'll say, look, you got to make sure you get enough carbs if you're building muscle. But when I look at you, I know you're in your 50s and you're built like a linebacker, like a college linebacker. Yet you're not doing steroids or any of those kinds of things. So, how would you say that a carnivore diet impacts your goals in the gym if you're wanting to, say, build muscle mass and build strength?
Yeah. I mean, well, like I said, here are the disadvantages, because I think that's important to understand. Remember I said it's very satiating in society.
Folks, there is a lot to worry about these days, and a lot of it keeps us up at night. And sometimes I've got a really hard time falling asleep. But ever since I started adding magnesium breakthrough to my nightly routine, I've been able to quiet my mind and get the best sleep ever. So, unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, magnesium breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium, designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep and stay asleep and wake up refreshed. So, if you're struggling to calm down and get a good night's rest, I highly recommend Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. So don't miss out on the most relaxing sleep ever with Magnesium Breakthrough. So for an exclusive offer, go to bioptimizers.com/wholehouse and use promo code WHOLEHOUSE, that's HOLEHOUSE, during the checkout to save 10%. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, but you're going to make sure that your monthly supply is guaranteed.
So when it comes to building muscle, and this is clear, I mean, the research is clear on this. You need, the first thing is stimulus. You got a resistance train. There is no building significant muscle without busting your butt in the gym. It trumps diet all the way, 10 times over. Then you need adequate protein, which you're certainly going to get on a carnivore diet. And then it's really just energy beyond that. And it's just like, what is your preferred energy source? Now, fat certainly fills the bill for that. So if you carbohydrates they taste good. They're easy to acquire. They're cheap. They are, something that a lot of people are accustomed to. So it's kind of what you're chronically adapted to. But you absolutely can build muscle on a diet that is without carbohydrates in there. In fact, I had the world's strongest man, Eddie Hall, just consult me a couple last 2 weeks ago. Asked him, and he's starting a carnivore diet, and he's seen no difference. It's up to this point. He's training on. He said, "I'm training fine. I've got no problem." And he's one of the strongest guys in the world doing this. And so, it's just a matter of. Well, I was going to say there was a paper that came out recently by the ISSN, the International Society for Sports Nutrition, and they basically said that low carb diets are inferior to higher carb diets when it comes to muscle building. But, and here's a caveat: the primary reason for that is lack of calories and lower protein amounts. So because people just naturally eat less, you've got to force yourself to eat more. So you might have to eat when you're not hungry. You might have to force feed yourself a little bit. And that's the trick. That's really the differentiating factor for most of that. And then it's chronic adaptation, because it takes you as an athlete, probably 3 months, 6 months to really chronically adapt to this sort of new fuel source. And once you get there, no problem. I put on 10 pounds of muscle as a guy in his late 50s, without drugs. I don't take TRT, as you mentioned. I don't take steroids, TRT, and that's not easy to do. I mean, and I like I said, I mean, and it's not like I'm a new lifter. I've been lifting weights for 45 years now, and I've still been able to put on 10 pounds in my mid to late 50s on a carnivore diet. So it's definitely doable, but I bust my ass. I mean, I get in there and train hard, and you got to be consistent with it.
And what about testosterone levels? Because I know a lot of men, even if they're not trying to be fit, they struggle with that, right? I think that if you look at a lot of the food that we've been fed, and to me, I look at it as part of some overall larger agenda from people that don't like the human race, really, that, hey, we're going to turn the men into women, and we're going to, pump them full of estrogen and soy, and, drop their testosterone, drop their sperm counts. And I feel like that's part of you go look at the food pyramid. I'll pull the food pyramid up really quickly, because it's kind of crazy to look at it, right? Compared to what we now know. It's like, oh, wow, they say, all your servings of bread, then some fruit, then a little bit of meat and dairy, and then, a little bit of, your obviously your seed oil shouldn't be even be on here, but I mean, I use butter like water. Like, my butter to bread ratio is typically 1-to-1 if I'm eating a butter piece of bread. So I'm a big butter fan. But what would you say though, in terms of the overall diet versus, I lost my train of thought there. The question I was asking was
about testosterone function.
Testosterone, yeah. I got so excited about our pyramid, I forgot about the testosterone. So how does it affect testosterone and just overall manhood?
Well, I think in general, I mean, when you talk about guys that are hypogonadal or have testosterone deficiency, whatever that's defined, whether it's on free testosterone or something else, I mean, it's really a clinical diagnosis, quite honestly, because the absolute testosterone number is not as important as people think it is. I mean, it does have a role, but I mean, there are some people that are more testosterone sensitive, and they have this greater androgen receptor density, and diet can impact that. In fact, my testosterone is not super high, but I'm one of the strongest guys you'll meet at my age. And again, I don't take these drugs because I probably have very sensitive receptors. Now, what I see generally as people improve their metabolic health, their clinical expression of testosterone function improves. The guys have more morning erections. They have better libido. Their body composition improves. Their mental health. So the so-called benefits of testosterone tend to be displayed better in people on a carnivore diet, provided that they get better. They lose weight and they improve their body composition and so on and so forth. And so, in general, it's been a positive for both men and women, for that matter. I mean, women feel like their sexual function improves and their body composition improves. So, I mean, in general, now there's a couple, now like if you're under eating, some people will notice the opposite. Like I said, this is a problem with under eating, because this is one of the biggest issues I see as a negative is a lot of people just under eat. And then they just like, okay, now I don't feel good. And maybe my testosterone goes down a little bit, but the number itself has been all over the place. I see a lot of people that go on a carnivore diet and their testosterone go from 300 to 1,000. I mean, I see that not infrequently, but just as frequently, I see it doesn't change, or sometimes it goes down. But again, what we really care about is the clinical side, because, it's like, as a physician, and testosterone replacement has become a little bit of an industry. It's a little bit shady, and it's a $4 or $5 billion industry right now. And some guys will do those. If your number hits a certain threshold here, you get the prescription because there's money. They make money, even if whether you need it or not. And I think you have to really discern what is your clinical situation. If let's say your testosterone is low and you're obese and you're metabolically sick, I think you do much better for yourself by addressing those issues, losing the weight, getting in shape, taking your lifestyle, eating better, than just going on testosterone replacement. I think that's a metabolic Band-Aid, which is probably not that effective, to be honest with you. I mean, certainly, yeah, there's guys that abuse it and they take more than they need and they put on a lot of muscle and so on and so forth. But in general, I'd say just getting healthier, which I think the diet lends itself to, generally improves testosterone function. The fact that we've had dwindling testosterone over time I think it's a direct result of certainly our diet. Our diet's gone to hell. I mean, our diet is absolute garbage right now. I mean, 90% of the stuff in the grocery store is inedible in my view. And then there's other things, sedentary stuff and a lot of the stuff. We've gotten soft as a society in general. And I think that's part of the problem. But I think the nutrition is a large part of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's where we're at, right? It's soft, good times create soft men create hard times. And now I think we're at that transition of hard times create strong men again, right? Which is what
hopefully,
having.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where we're at with that. But I mean, it's disconcerting when I walk around and I see so many guys in their 20s that look like they have no physical capability at all. I mean, it's like I feel sorry for them, and sorry for their potential mates if they can even find one. But I mean, we're in a strange time right now.
Yeah, we certainly are. It's funny because I was actually just interviewing a ex-border agent last night, and he was telling me, he's like, we have these Venezuelan gangs coming up here. He's like, they're coming in, they're looking around in America the same way that a tiger would look if you dropped him into a deer pen at the zoo. All these deer that have never had any threat, they're all overweight from eating unlimited food, and they're just looking at this like this. They're just right for the taking. And so, we'll see how that all plays out. But so with this, so obviously, you mentioned that with one particular study that there is about 100% improvement in diabetes, right? And so what we typically see, if you look at the trend with any kind of lifestyle change or whatever it is, that actually undermines the treatments that come out of the medical industrial complex. Typically, these lifestyle changes are attacked pretty heavily, right? Even since RFK Jr. has been talking about seed oils, I'm now seeing magazine or online articles coming out saying, well, seed oils aren't actually that bad for us, and they're trying to justify it because there's an industry that's suffering at the hand of the truth being brought out. So when it comes to the carnivore diet, are you seeing that the more mainstream perspective is attacking it or trying to discredit it? And if so, what is the most common thing that you're seeing thrown at it, so that, say you're telling one of your friends this and you say, oh, I'm doing the carnivore diet, they're going to say, well, I saw on MSNBC that they said that this is why it's bad. What are you seeing as what's being loaded into the cannon to attack the carnivore diet?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think from a I guess, quote unquote, scientific point of view, they'll say, well, we don't have any long-term data on these diets, for one. That's true. But honestly, we don't have really robust evidence for any diet long term. There's no like long term randomized control trial on any diet. It's all associative data. It's all like short term biomarker data. So we don't really have good data on that. But they still say, well, we think you're gonna get more heart disease or cancer or something like that, which is there's no way to know that, to be honest. Whether it's helpful or not. They'll talk about, of course, some people will see with any low carb diet, their cholesterol will rise, and that's really directly related to as there's a really nice meta analysis that was done by a fellow by the name of Adrian Sotomoda last year, or actually earlier this year, came out in January of this year. 41 randomized control trials shows that the major reason for rising LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, on any low-carb diet is how lean you get. The leaner you get, the more likely your cholesterol is to rise. And there's a mechanism that underpins that called the lipid energy model, which just postulates that if our body is low on energy, and particularly carbohydrate, then our liver will traffic more fat to supply the cell's nutrition. And whether that's a bad thing or not is unknown. There are some studies that have come out now. A nice study out of UCLA by Matt Budoff has shown that it may be that that's actually not a problem at all. Now we can't make a definitive statement on that, but it's changing that. But these are some of the things they'll attack it with. Now they've also tied red meat eating and carnivore diets to being fascist, alt-right, that they're trying to label it politically. And it pains me to see it, because I think nutrition isn't political. I mean, it's like all humans need to be eating well, regardless of what your particular political belief or ideology is. And so I mean, it's really, lack of fiber, it's like, oh my God, you're going to have all kinds of bowel. When interestingly, like I said, we just published a study on inflammatory bowel disease, and carnivore diet has been wonderfully effective for that. And these are people with the most damaged guts on the planet, basically, that have Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. It completely puts it into remission, or at least has for many patients. And so that's the exact opposite of what you would think based upon the need for fiber and so on and so forth. And I can tell you, I haven't had fiber in my diet of any significant amount in 8 years, and I'm totally fine. There's nothing wrong with my gut function. In fact, it's the best it's been. It's better than it's ever been in my life. And so I think the problem is it ruffles so many feathers in the nutrition space, and nutrition science is just not very good science. I gotta be honest with you. It's wildly, there's a lot of conflict of interest in there for one. And it's just hard to do high quality human trials on diet, because it's hard to assess what people actually eat over a lifetime. No one really knows. I mean, they attempt to do it with food frequency questionnaires where they say, hey, what have you eaten over the last 5 years? And nobody knows that accurately. We can guess, but I mean, it's only at best to guess. And a lot of people underestimate or overestimate based on what they think is healthy. And but yeah, they're going to attack it on lack of long-term data. They're going to attack it as a right-wing thing in many ways. They'll attack it based on the tendency for some people, particularly lean people, to raise their cholesterol. They'll attack it on lack of fiber. All of those things don't really hold up to real scrutiny when you really look at the people, because I deal with these people every day. I've seen thousands of people that have put chronic, horrible multiple sclerosis, autoimmune conditions, Crohn's disease, psoriasis, suicidal depression. I mean, all these things completely into remission by doing this. And this is something that, again, it threatens a lot of money, because they're, think of how much money the pharmaceutical industry makes. I mean, it's the biggest federal lobbyist by far. And they've got, for every member of Congress, they've got 3 lobbyists on the pharmacy side. They got 3 people breathing down their throat, trying to get them to legislate in their favor. And so yeah, I mean, it's there, and as you know, the media is, who advertises in the media? Well, every time you turn on the TV, how many drug commercials do you see? It's like every second commercial is some friggin' drug commercial, and I don't even watch TV anymore. But even when I'm in a hotel and the TV's on, I'm like, oh God, there's another drug commercial.
Yeah, I think it's like more than half the funding. That's something, actually, I think it was RFK Jr. was talking recently about this, that with Fox News, he'd brought a documentary to them. He'd known that the former owner, and the guy said, look, I would love to play this, but 70% of my advertising on my primetime spots coming from big pharma. So I can't run this.
Yeah. And it's shocking, because outside of the United States, I think the only other country is New Zealand that allows pharmaceutical advertising on TV, which is, I don't know why we just don't banish that. I mean, that should be, if like they get in, if Trump and RFK get into office, well, I don't know what his role may or may not be, but that should be something they do right away, to say, hey, look, you can't advertise on TV anymore. So sorry, too bad. Just like they banned the smoking, like remember it was like you couldn't advertise cigarette brands on NASCAR or something. They made these decisions, and they easily could do that, but it's just got to take somebody with some will to stand up to these people.
I agree. So as we're wrapping up, I want to bring up two websites here. First off is your book, right? So for folks that do want to follow this, the carnivore diet, the carnivore diet book. This is your book. It's on Amazon. Do you have any other more recent books, or is this the main book that if someone said, hey, Shawn, how can I find out your greatest, kind of work of knowledge? Where would it be?
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote that book came out a couple of years ago, but there's nothing in there that significantly I would change based on recent. I could include more studies that support this, but on how to do it and what it means, it's solid. It's like, you don't need anything else. I think that, what was I going to say? One thing I will say that's important that I've discovered just about dealing with people, because I deal with people. A lot of people, you can give them the instruction sheet on what to do, and they still don't do it. Right. So you got to figure out how to motivate yourself, because this is, like I said, a lot of people are dealing with addiction, and it's tough to overcome without some support. So I think finding some place to get support, and there's a lot of online groups that do carnivore groups now. I have one of them, but there's a lot of them out there you could find, and some, I like our company Rivero. Like I said, if you need medical supervision, which I think a lot of people, it probably benefits to have a physician overseeing some of this stuff, because as I mentioned, if you're taking a bunch of medications or have some chronic disease, it just makes sense to have a physician that is actually, and this is a frustrating thing that a lot of people I see, that they'll go on a carnivore diet and they literally will put their disease in complete remission. And their physician tell them, well, you're hurting yourself. This is the wrong thing to do to you. And then they'll convince them to stop, and then they get sick again. And then it just doesn't make sense. So our physicians are all, they're trained. They support this sort of stuff. They work with people. They help to deprescribe their medications. That's something I would say inside. The book's great. I'm glad when people buy the book. I think it has everything you need to know to start this thing. But again, it's just, that's the knowledge, but you got to put the knowledge into action. Sometimes you need a little bit more of hand-holding, depending on who you are. Some people, you say, hey, go do this, and they do that. But other people, they got questions, they want support, they need motivation, they have, and I'm fine with that. And some people want different. Some people want them just to kick their ass and yell at them, hey, get after it. But, or some people want more kind of just hand-holding. So it depends.
And where's the community or the group that people can find if they want to find like minds for this?
Yours. I can use mine, for instance. I have a website called carnivore.diet, and I'm running that for about, I don't know, last 4 or 5 years in different variations. And I've had ongoing communities forever. And I do a meeting every single morning. I go on to carnivore.diet, and I have a meeting. Sometimes it turns into a podcast. We'll have a guest, but in general, at least several days a week, I'm in there and supporting groups and stuff like that. And then, of course, our Rivero company, I do the same thing with them, because I think everybody needs some level of support and, understanding and it's because it can be isolating. When you eat outside the norm, all of a sudden you're kind of like the weirdo, right? And you feel like a pariah in many ways. And so I tell a lot of people, like, hey, if you're going to eat and you don't want to answer questions, like you go to steakhouse, you order. If you just go to the steakhouse and you just order, just give me a filet with nothing on it, right? No, nothing, no side, no nothing. All of a sudden, everybody's going to look at you like, what are you doing, man? What's weird wrong with you? But if you just say, hey, just give me a steak and a piece of broccoli, and you just don't eat the broccoli, just leave it there. It's a decoy. No one's going to notice. No one cares. It's like okay. We do a very cursory check. Everybody's eating normal. No discussion needs to be had. So you just kind of fill your plate with the decoyed food, and then you just say, hey, I wasn't hungry, or it didn't look good to me, or whatever. You can make those excuses. So there's ways to socially integrate so you're not, perceived as a weirdo.
That makes sense. Actually, I was going to conclude by, I have one final question for you. I'm glad you mentioned it. That piece of broccoli, right? It seems like it's very innocent, right? It's not, not adding carbohydrates. It's, you got lots of different nutrients and stuff. So why avoid the piece of broccoli?
Well, you may not have to. It depends on how you tolerate it. I don't like broccoli. I don't think it tastes very good. But it's interesting that, for instance, most people don't know this. Broccoli didn't appear in the United States until 1920. And it wasn't anything that we even was part of our diet, and at least in this country. It was, I think, originally maybe cultivated in China, I think a few thousand years ago. So these things were never part of the long-term human diet. They've all been sort of invented, through various, botanical techniques, I guess. But I mean, for many people, it literally messes them up. I mean, it's something that like the gut is irritated by that. I mean, you think about it. Once you start, like if you think about eating a meal and digestion, we always think about a little bit of fullness, a little bit of discomfort, maybe a little gas. Some people, they belch or they fart or something like that. That's not normal, but we normalize it. It's literally, if you think about any other system in our body, the circulatory system, the cardiovascular system, the lungs, the musculoskeletal system, if anything was uncomfortable or hurt, what would you think? Something's wrong, right? Why does my elbow hurt? That's something wrong with it. Why does my chest hurt when I actually, that's something really wrong. But when it comes to our gut, oh, it's just a little bloating. It's okay. It's not right. It's either the wrong food or there's something wrong with your gut. One of those two things must be the case. But we've normalized it because everybody's eating the same way. Everybody's used to it. And we're a species that eats a diet that is not optimized for us anymore. And I mean, we can look at, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at the sort of the history of the human species. Now, some people will say evolution is bullshit and everything like that. But if we just assume that there's some evidence that even if you go back, 8,000 years ago, if you're more of a creationist, there was a period of time where humans were taller and more robust and stronger bone system. And then we adopted agriculture and we became smaller. Our brains literally shrunk. Our overall health, our dental health got worse. And that's because we changed our diet from what it had been. And what it had been before was hunter-gatherer with probably more emphasis on hunter. And so once we changed that out to a more grain-based agrarian society, which allowed civilization to occur with all its pros and cons, our individual health has gone to hell compared to what we were. And so when you kind of dial that back, you just realize what happens. But I mean, I just say, try it yourself. I mean, maybe broccoli's perfectly fine for you or whatever. You pick your vegetable. It'd be like, I never liked vegetables, so it wasn't a problem for me. As a kid, I hated them. As a young adult, I hated them. I forced myself to eat them. I kind of, whatever, acquired taste type of thing. As long as you put enough animal fat on there and covered it in butter, you could gag it down. But if anybody's eating raw, you think about raw vegetation, plain spinach, plain broccoli, it tastes awful, In my view.
True.
I don't know. I mean, maybe some people like that stuff, but I mean, it's just like, it just doesn't taste very good.
Yeah.
So
you take a plate of raw spinach and you cover it with seed oil dressing and cheese and all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's
cheese
healthy.
and bacon and egg and walnuts and cranberries and balsamic vinaigrette. Yeah, you can gag that down, but you just say, hey, let's go eat a bowl of leaves. It's like, why the hell would I do that? I mean, you think about what would be the motivation prehistorically. What would be the motivation to eat a bunch of leaves? It's like they taste bad. They're bitter. They don't provide any energy. It's like, why? I mean, because I want to poop more. I mean, that's literally what you do. It makes you poop more. And if that's what you get, if that's what you like, you can spend more time in the toilet, then good.
Yeah. Or just eat a bunch of Indian. It seems to, that chicken vindaloo really does that. So anyway, Shawn, I know that you've got a time limit, as do I. And I appreciate you giving us this time. It's, I've learned, and actually I'll be jumping into this within the next couple of days. I'm going to do it for probably a good 90 days or so, maybe hopefully longer, but just to shake things up. So
yeah, we'll see how it goes. Just eat enough. Like I said, eat enough.
I will actually, I love steak. So I will have no problem. Eating.
I've got a ribeye. I'm going to start eating in about 12 minutes. I'll be eating my ribeye steak here in a few minutes and about half a dozen eggs. So that's
how many ounces is this one you're going to be?
I think this one is about, I don't know, about a pound or so, something like that. So anyway.
Well, good. Shawn, thanks again, man. It's been so nice talking to you, and I really appreciate you giving us this time today.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, have you heard about Dinesh D'Souza's new movie? It's based on his book by the same name, Vindicating Trump. So this movie is a searching examination about the real reasons why the left and the Democrats hate Donald Trump so much. They call him a tyrannical dictator, but in truth, it's the American government's authoritarian regime that's afraid that Trump's going to dethrone them again. And as a charismatic leader, he mobilizes the people. He gets things done, and they don't like that. So that's why they're trying to get rid of him, trying to throw him in jail using lawsuits and indictments, even trying multiple assassination attempts on his life. So Vindicating Trump reveals why Donald Trump is the one man who can defeat the tyranny of the left. So folks, don't miss Dinesh D'Souza's unqualified defense of Trump, Vindicating Trump. It's in theaters nationwide starting Friday, September 27th. So make your plans now. Get your tickets online at vindicatingtrump.com. Again, it's vindicatingtrump.com. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and show you the trailer. It's about a 2-minute trailer for the movie Vindicating Trump. So folks, enjoy the trailer and make sure you get your tickets at vindicatingtrump.com.
Somebody has to help this country, and if they don't, the country and the world are in big trouble.
Someone's got to overturn the tables in the temple.
Trump jumping into the presidential race.
She's a bit worried.
Of the Apprentice guy?
You know the feeling of power. Could you handle it or would it devour?
They fear that power. You didn't do an insurrection. Had you called for one, there would have been one. And there would be one if you called for one now.
I'm not sure I want that power. I want the power just to make the country better. America first!
And that scares them.
A lot about Donald Trump scares them.
Let's look at everything. Campaign, his family. Let's get foreign eyes on him.
We have one target. You know who he is.
Going after their companies, their families. That is a dictator.
It's a very dangerous time for our country.
The goal is to put him in jail because they're so afraid of his voice.
I am your voice!
We'll bury him so deep in legal, it'll bankrupt them.
Broke Donald in jail right before the election. That's
sorry for being that guy, but isn't that election interference?
It's not interference if we do it.
We just want a free and fair election.
Sounds expensive.
Ballots ain't cheap.
Wait. Did you actually say the word buy the ballots?
We were able to purchase 10,000 ballots.
That's terrifying.
They cheat in many different ways. That's all they're good at. Ready to save democracy?
We need to stop him permanently.
And that person will be risking his life.
Too bad it's not the 60s, right?
It's the way you survived.
And I said, get me up.
Trump has beaten back every attack against him.
It's like the damn Terminator. We're going to fix our borders, and we're going to fix our elections. We're going to win.
This is my legacy.
Vindicating Trump.
The best is yet to come.
Only in theaters September 27th.